June 22, 1986, Estadio Azteca, Mexico City. Argentina against England, a World Cup quarter-final, 6 years after the two countries had actually gone to war over a set of islands most fans had never heard of. Nobody in that stadium needed reminding what this match meant. 4 minutes. That's all it took for one man to produce the most controversial goal in World Cup history, and, right after it, the greatest one anybody has ever scored. 51. A miscued clearance drops into the box. Diego Maradona, 5'5", jumps for it against England's 6-foot goalkeeper Peter Shilton and simply punches the ball into the net with his fist. The referee doesn't see it. Goal stands. Maradona would later describe it, half laughing, half daring anyone to argue, as a little bit the hand of God and a little bit the head of Maradona. England's players are furious immediately. The replays leave no doubt at all. Doesn't matter. It counts. 4 minutes later, he does something no amount of outrage can touch. He picks the ball up near the halfway line, in his own half, and starts running. 10 seconds. 5 England players beaten in one unbroken sprint. Cutting one way then the other. Defenders lunging at space he's already left behind, before he rounds the keeper and rolls it into an empty net. FIFA later voted it goal of the century. Writers have spent decades trying to find the right words for it, and mostly land on the same conclusion. Nobody has done anything like that, at that level, on that stage, before or since. 2 goals, 4 minutes apart. Same match. One was theft dressed up as genius. The other was genius that needed no defense at all. This is the part everyone forgets once the conversation turns to what came later. Before any of it, the addiction, the scandal, the slow public unraveling, there was a level of football that maybe 5 human beings alive have ever come close to. He wasn't built like the other greats. Short, low to the ground, nothing like the towering forwards who dominated that era physically. What he had instead was control so tight that defenders genuinely compared marking him to trying to tackle smoke. He could change direction at full speed without the ball leaving his foot, absorb hits that would put most players on the ground, and find passes through gaps that, as far as anyone else on the pitch could tell, didn't exist at that World Cup. He didn't just play well. He carried the entire team on his back. Argentina's squad was good, not stacked, nothing close to the so-called golden generations people talk about with other countries. And yet Maradona finished the tournament with 5 goals and 5 assists, involved directly in 10 of Argentina's 14 goals across the whole competition. He scored the opener in the final against West Germany and set up the winner. Argentina lifted the trophy. Almost everyone who watched it, then and since, has landed on some version of the same sentence. This was one man winning a World Cup, more or less by himself. FIFA would eventually name him Joint Player of the Century alongside Pelé. Writers who've covered generations of the sport keep coming back to that 1986 tournament as the single greatest individual performance football has ever produced. None of this needed scandal to be true. It's just what happened, documented, on a pitch in the summer of 1986. A player built completely unlike anyone else, doing things with a ball nobody else could replicate, at the exact moment the whole world happened to be watching. That's God this story is about. Not a figure of speech, not something that got exaggerated with retelling over 40 years. A real, statistical, universally agreed peak of human footballing ability, produced by a 25-year-old from a poor neighborhood outside Buenos Aires, on the biggest stage the sport has. And that's exactly what makes everything after so hard to look at directly. Nobody ever doubted the talent was real. What football has spent decades trying to understand is what happened to the man carrying it. Winning a World Cup on your own does something to a person's life that almost nobody else on earth has to deal with. And Maradona didn't just win it. In the space of one tournament, he became the most famous person in Argentina, arguably the most famous athlete alive, and a symbol that had stopped being about football a long time before the final whistle. He'd grown up in Villa Fiorito, a poor neighborhood outside Buenos Aires, parts of it without running water when he was a kid. That background wasn't a footnote to how Argentina saw him. He wasn't just a great player to them. He was proof to millions of people who had nothing that greatness could come out of nowhere. That kind of symbolism carries real weight, and it only got heavier after 1986, a tournament played in the shadow of a war with England that still felt raw. Beating them in that quarter-final meant something to a lot of people that had nothing to do with football at all. By the time the tournament ended, Maradona had stopped being a person in any normal sense. National symbol, working-class icon, most scrutinized athlete on the planet, all at once, with no space left between any of those roles and his actual day-to-day life. A year earlier, he'd already signed for Napoli, a club in one of Italy's poorer regions, in a city that recognized something of itself in him, the same way Villa Fiorito had. Naples had never won an Italian league title. Maradona would deliver two, and the bond that created still borders on religious devotion in parts of that city decades later. But Naples in the 1980s was also, and this is documented extensively by Italian authorities and journalists since, a city where organized crime had real influence over daily life. The Camorra took a specific interest in Maradona. This isn't tabloid speculation. Italian prosecutors, journalists, and later court records established that people connected to the Giuliano crime family deliberately cultivated close access to him, supplying him with cocaine and pulling him into a social world that offered constant availability of the drug alongside what looked, on the surface, like real friendship and protection. Maradona himself acknowledged parts of this relationship years later. His first failed drug test came in 1991, cocaine, a 15-month ban. But by his own later account, and by extensive reporting since, the use had actually started years earlier, building slowly across his time in Naples, right at the intersection of enormous fame, constant exposure, and a crime network with every reason to keep him close and supplied. Here's what's worth sitting with. This isn't about assigning blame to one side. It's about noticing there was nothing there at all protecting him. Modern elite athletes exist inside systems that simply didn't exist in the 1980s. Sports psychologists on staff, structured media training, player welfare programs. Whole agencies built to manage exactly this kind of pressure. None of it existed in any real form for a footballer back then, let alone one carrying the specific weight Maradona was carrying, both a working-class symbol and a target for organized crime looking to profit off proximity to him. This is where the word cursed starts to fall apart. A curse implies something arrived out of nowhere, an unlucky twist with no real cause behind it. What actually happened had causes, traceable, documented, human causes, a support system that didn't exist, a crime network that saw opportunity in his fame, a level of scrutiny nothing from that era was built to handle. Consumed fits better than cursed, because consuming something requires an actual thing doing the consuming. In Maradona's case, there were several. 3 years after the ban ended, Maradona was back on the biggest stage in the sport, playing for Argentina at the 1994 World Cup in the United States. He scored against Greece in the opening match, then celebrated by sprinting toward a pitch-side camera with an expression so wide-eyed and manic it reads, looking back now, as genuinely unsettling. Days later, he failed another drug test, a cocktail of banned stimulants this time. He was sent home from the tournament immediately, his international career effectively finished at 33, in front of a global audience watching it happen live. What came after is documented everywhere. Newspapers, medical records, his own public statements over the years, repeated struggles with cocaine addiction, weight gain severe enough to be visible to anyone, at points exceeding 120 kilograms, multiple hospitalizations, including a heart attack in 2004 that very nearly killed him at 43, a stretch in Cuba trying to get clean. Periods of genuine recovery followed by public relapses, played out not in private but in front of a media machine that had by then spent 2 decades switching back and forth between worship and autopsy. He kept coming back, coached Argentina at the 2010 World Cup, took various club and international roles in the years after, sometimes looking healthier, sometimes visibly not. He died in November 2020, 60 years old, a heart attack that came weeks after brain surgery. Argentina, the same country that once saw him as living proof that greatness could rise out of nothing, declared 3 days of national mourning. Hundreds of thousands of people lined the streets of Buenos Aires for the funeral. For years, the explanation for all of it settled into one comfortable word: cursed. As if some force with no connection to anything anyone actually did simply decided that the man who produced the greatest individual World Cup performance in history was fated to spend the next 3 decades falling apart in public. That word is doing a lot of quiet work, and almost none of it holds up. Cursed implies inevitability, implies nobody could have done anything differently because it was written somewhere beyond anyone's control. It's clean, almost mystical, and it happens to let absolutely everyone else off the hook. Look at what actually surrounded him instead. Football institutions in the 80s and 90s, with no real infrastructure for player welfare at all, no sports psychologists, nothing built to support an athlete carrying the exact symbolic weight Maradona had carried since he was 25. A crime network in Naples that, according to Italian courts and journalists, deliberately cultivated access to him and supplied the substance that would go on to define the rest of his life. A media culture across several countries and several decades that treated him as either a god to worship or a scandal to mine, and rarely as a person who might have needed something else entirely. None of that was fate. Every piece of it was a choice, a system, a failure made and kept in place by real people and real institutions over more than 30 years. A curse doesn't have an author. What happened to Maradona had several. This is, in the end, the pattern that keeps showing up underneath football's biggest stories. It's rarely one villain. It's almost never simple bad luck. It's usually a structure built by a lot of different hands over a long stretch of time that ends up consuming something extraordinary because nobody involved was ever built to protect it. Diego Maradona wasn't cursed. He was one of the most talented human beings to ever play the sport, dropped into the middle of institutional, criminal, and cultural forces that had every reason to take from him and almost none to protect him. He was consumed, slowly, in public, over 30 years, by exactly the things this story just walked through. That's a harder story to tell than a curse. It's also the true one.